obviously, you're all interested in Texas because Karl and I were just perusing your library, all these books about Texas. But
the Texas Almanac, 1857 to 1873. Let's find out what happened on this day in 1857.
Well, here's the title I think is most appropriate: The Search for Maturity. It's been an ongoing dilemma in Texas when that will ever happen. So we are three Texans with a fair amount of experience in writing about Texas and living in Texas. And Doug Brinkley and Karl Rove, we all are Austinites. We have a cumulative maybe 150 years in Texas. So I think we have a fairly well covered. And I kind of thought that we'd start by kind of picking a fight and talk about Texas versus California.
Stop coming. Please. We like your money, but please.
It's a really interesting, it's a historic migration in many respects. The number of people that are streaming into, 330 people come to Austin every day. And 10% of all the immigrants into Texas are from California. And another thing, a statistic to keep in mind is that by 2050, Texas will have doubled in size and will be the size of California and New York combined.
In this century.
Yeah.
Doubled in this century.
Yeah, we'll live to see it. Some of you people in this audience anyway will. And so Texas is the future of America. And it's a fact that I don't think that most of the nation has taken into account, and I can tell you for sure that Texans haven't. To assume the responsibility of leadership that we're going to have to, the search for maturity is going to have to take a step forward. So I would like to get, maybe we could start with Doug, your thoughts about where Texas is now and where it's headed in view of this awesome responsibility in front of us.
Well, it's wonderful to be here. I not only have Karl sitting next to me, but I see his face on your library shelves right in my purview over here. This is like Karl Rove mania going on here in Rancho Mirage. Look, Karl was born in an elevator in 1950, right, in Denver.
It's Christmas Day.
Okay. Christmas Day, Denver, really.
Yeah, St. Joseph's Hospital, same place as John Kerry.
There you go.
He's always pissed when I...
And I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. So we're
Oklahoma City.
Yeah, in Oklahoma City. So in a way, we're all transplants, and Texas is a state filled with transplants, but it's also filled with people that are so loyal to the state. The pride of the Lone Star Republic still prevails. And there's so much to say about it, because you talk about a state and its many states. There's the famous amusement park, Six Flags. That's there. It's supposed to be the Six Flags, right, Larry and Karl, that flew over Texas, but there are like 6 different Texases today. The idea of it being one, there are reasons why it's one, but there are different regional differences. I mean, when I tell people I teach at Rice University in Houston, people just think of it as people with guns and oil walking around, and they forget Houston is one of the high-tech capitals of the world. The first word said, in space is Houston. It went from being the Bayou City to becoming the rocket capital of America. And young people studying more and more, we're living in a satellite culture where these rockets, like Elon Musk is putting up rockets that are reusable out of Texas, and then you have the NASA infrastructure, and then you have McDonnell Douglas or other companies opening up places there. Texas is very much into the aerospace and space industry and satellite industry out of Houston. I was teaching at Rice, and we had the first really openly LGBTQ lesbian mayor of Houston, but nobody asked me that about East. They want to know about the guns and the oil, and talk about Ellis Island. Houston is Ellis Island. Everybody from the world. It's not just the migration from California to Texas, people all over the world are seeing it as a land of promise because they can afford, if they come from Guatemala or whether they're coming from Vietnam, that they might be able to get their kids into school, have an air-conditioned little home, and start fighting for the American dream. So the diversity in a city like Houston, the fourth largest city in the country, probably going to be third large, soon to be the third largest in the country. And the biggest port in the United States, that port of Houston. The problem is, for me as an environmentalist, California does stricter guidelines. When the ships come in here, they're checking it for, if you're getting iron ore pellets coming from China or somewhere. The regulatory structure of California on environmental things are much more rigorous. So many people and companies are saying, screw that, we'll go through the Panama Canal, come up by Galveston, go to the port of Texas, use the port of Houston, use the Houston ship channel, and so they're benefiting Houston because of that. The downside to that, it's great for business, is eyesores. You want to see ugliness go around parts of Houston where it is an unplanned city, slabs, from an aesthetic point of view, oftentimes it feels like it's not up to par as people in California would expect, in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and the like. The other thing to keep in mind is San Antonio, I believe, is our 7th largest city in the country. And where we live, Austin, I believe, Larry, what? 11th now. We're 11th largest city in the United States, Austin.
And the fastest growing. Yeah.
Fastest. And then that's not dealing with Texas Hill Country or Metro Dallas and Houston growth. So it is a phenomenal nation unto itself, but it shares that with California. One of the most talked about stats of California is California could be its own country. Its economy is larger than, Texas says the same thing. And so I would call it a healthy rivalry going on between Texas and California. California is still the most populous. I think California's state university system is superior to Texas's. But the fact is, the American dream is affordable housing, and that Texas is offering, and it's attracting people that don't like being overtaxed and are feeling frustrated at California or New York wages. And it's not just Texas growing, guys. It's Florida, it's Alabama, it's North Carolina. The southern zone is growing. But California, due to its physical beauty, coastline, and all that's here, is in no threat of losing its appeal. If you're looking at the world's most innovative and dramatic, talented people, you'll find them living in greater Los Angeles, not greater Houston, because of the environment that you can live in here.
If you love it that much, go there.
Well, I am. I'm here. My daughter's going to Pepperdine. My dad lives in Walnut Creek, California. My sister lives in San Francisco. I love California.
Carl,
This is a California crowd here, Carl.
Yeah,
you're not going to play into it.
Yeah, I'm going to be loyal to my state. There.
Colorado's your state.
Yeah, no, Texas is my state.
Carl, I want to talk to you about. Doug touched on the fact it's such an interesting country we live in, where all the states can have totally different models, and the two models that really matter in America are the California model and the Texas model, and they are wildly different in so many respects, and each has much to recommend it, but the consequence right now is that in California, the Republican Party is a non-entity. It's collapsed. Mm-hmm. And in Texas, you haven't had a statewide Democrat elected, I think, 28 years. And it's been in total, the Republicans have been in total control of all levers of the government for the last couple of decades. So my observation is that this has unfortunately empowered extremists in any party, because they don't have the kind of balancing effect of real partisan resistance. What's your analysis of our two states in that regard?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we're as bad as California when it comes to sort of one-party dominance.
Yeah.
I mean, California, you don't have Republican mayors. You had a Republican mayor in Los Angeles, but you don't have, sort of a counterpoint to the state leadership of Democrats in Sacramento. It's Democrats all the way down.
Yeah.
But I'd say also that there's a difference in Texas Republicans and California Republicans, that it means that the Republicans in Texas have got more viability longer. I mean, and look, talk about, one of the reasons the Republicans have run things for the last 28 years is that for the 118 years before that, Democrats ran everything.
Yeah.
So we enjoyed one-party state for over a century, and then it changed, and the Republicans will lose it if they forget that what they got there in the first place is by representing the broadly conservative, growth-oriented values of the state of the people of our state. Doug mentioned Houston and San Francisco in the same paragraph. With all due respect, I'd take Houston any day over San Francisco because Houston doesn't have zoning. And so some of the worst parts of town can be redeveloped. Remember when the Heights, you didn't go into the Heights?
Yeah.
This was an area northwest of downtown and very convenient for downtown, but it wasn't safe. And yet what happened is far-seeing visionaries said, you know what, there's something to be made of this, and turned it into an exciting, dynamic neighborhood. And Houston has this ability to renew itself that a lot of cities don't have, and it also has the ability, getting a little bit more limited in the last couple of decades, but to provide affordable housing inside, in the inner city.
Yeah.
Quality affordable housing, as opposed to a lot of cities in the east and elsewhere where the quality of housing in the interior city declines and people flee to the suburbs. We all fled to the suburbs years ago, decades ago, in Montgomery County and Fort Bend County. But particularly, as Doug said, you go to Fort Bend County, it's about like visiting the United Nations. It is the largest planned Chinese American community is in Fort Bend County, Texas. I think there's something like 60,000 Chinese Americans in what was deliberately planned as a Chinese community in Fort Bend County. So the diversity of our state is really, I think, one of its great strengths. But you Californians, you're crazy. It's, I live in Terrytown. Larry and I don't know where you live.
Right near there.
Yeah. You don't tell people where you live. Why is that, Doug?
Stratford.
Oh, Stratford, okay.
Yeah.
So we all live in sort of West Austin, which is the old inner city suburb. And right across the street, I'm on the poor people's side of a street called Scenic. The rich people's side is the other side because it's on the lake. And there was this crummy house that was built like in the late 1940s, early 1950s. Flat top roof, crappy materials. The family that grew up there, the kids who were there in the early 50s now own the house and live in the house. Their parents passed and they took the house, and they're in their 70s and 80s. And people would come up over the years, and apparently the neighborhood lawyers would say, would you sell your house? How about $250,000? How about 500? And then in recent years, 750, how about it? And so a California Dave Vorsey showed up, said, how much? And the couple who are in their 70s, early 80s said, well, how about 16 million? She said, sold. Sold. So this happens just before COVID, and literally we'd moved in across the street. We're friends of Suzanne's from California. Would you be willing to sell your house for X? And I'm thinking, you're crazy. Where the hell am I going to live after I sell my house to you? But that's happening all. I'm shocked how many people are coming from California, and one of the first things they say is, oh my God, I get so much more house for my money here.
I know. We had, in our neighborhood, there's one block that has 3 billionaires on it. And, a billionaire in Austin was this morning I was closing an article for the New Yorker on Austin, so I'm all up on stats about Austin, but it's billionaires. We had Michael Dell, that was the first one, and then John Paul DeJoria, who's the ex-Hells Angels guy who went into cosmetics and made $1 billion. It's a real Austin
and has
story.
a statue. He's a Texan, so he has a statue in front of his house of his wife, naked. Anyway,
but we have another friend who had a house, a good friend of yours, real nearby, and he and his wife were at dinner, and there's a knock on the door, and it's Emma Stone. And she says, I want to buy your house. And his wife says, we live here. And he's a real estate developer, so it was never not going to happen.
My best friend, commercial real estate guy, said, how much?
Yeah.
How soon do you want it?
But in a way, guys, these stories are pointing to a provincialism of Texas.
Yes.
Because Emma Stones are all over in the woods out here. There's stars,
it's
Matt
totally
McConaughey's types are all over. This is California. Any of the athletes, people in the acting industry, people that talk about billionaires, we can count our few in Austin. They're all over out here in California.
But
they're here for a reason.
But
they're in Austin for a reason as well.
Right.
My wife is a native. So
but there's this many versus this many.
But it's going like this, and we're going like that.
Well,
I guess, Doug, you have a good point. But the thing is, that was never Austin. It was, and as Evan Smith said, Austin now has an upper class. And that's, as an old-time Austin, I feel a loss that's true. And I miss a lot of the simplicity, the intimacy of the city, the little college town we moved into. And it's transforming, and many good things are happening. I like the fact that it's amazing to me that many people moving into Austin every day, and yet more than that, jobs are being created. It's like a 2% unemployment rate in Austin, despite all that. So there are great things, but it's a different city. And
well, it's part of it. People not escaping taxes, and the other part is Austin has done a marvelous job of creating an environment like they do in California, living in a city. The Zilker Park, if you haven't been in Austin, where you go kayaking and hiking and walking and bird watching, is allowed Austin, the environmental community, working with conservatives, have worked to be the best of capitalism and the best of responsible capitalism concerning the environment. So it's made Austin quite an oasis. And one of the problems I have with Bob Caro's Lyndon Johnson books is he acts like where Lyndon Johnson lived in the hill country, there wasn't fresh water. I mean, we were living on an aquifer there. Just like Palm Springs has a water supply, so other desert communities might dry out. Austin actually has fresh water, which helps it tremendously, and it has wildlife, and it's charming. And Texans, there are have hospitality in the old southern sense of it. And so if you ask kids where they want to move now, they're saying Austin. But the California's in. Anybody trying to go to UCLA or USC or Stanford or Santa Clara, these are all bullets going up in the public estimation. Where it's hurting, and we can have California-Texas agreement, is the Northeast. People are wanting to leave that cold weather of the Northeast. Kids want to come down to the Sunbelt, Texas or California or Florida, are becoming very popular with a younger generation right now. So I don't think we have to pick Texas versus California. I think it's a false choice. I think they both have so many great virtues. But things that they don't have in Texas, why don't you look at where it's ranked in public education? Why don't you look on stats of environmental degradation in Texas? All of the heights that Karl was raving about, and it is a beautiful gentrification job, is moving out people of color and poor people, and it's an environmental justice cesspool up there when you get into the black community in the wards of Houston. California has labor unions. California has the United Farm Workers Movement, agriculture, unions here. Texas has not been taken in by the unions. Karl would say, good for Texas. And I say, good for California.
I'll speak for myself.
All right. Well, do you feel that they're...
I think that's inconsequential. I think the attitude
Unions are inconsequential?
Yeah, let me finish my thought. I think what Texas has is a pro-growth attitude. That's why
Chamber of Commerce attitude.
Well, no. That's why Schwab moved to Dallas. That's why Fisher Investments moved to Dallas and DFI moved to Austin. But it's also why we have two of the biggest automobile plants in the world, one in Arlington, Texas, and one in San Antonio.
And now the Gigafactory in Austin.
And now the Gigafactory in Austin.
Or
It's
Tesla,
it's why aircraft manufacturing is moving to Texas. It's why shipbuilding is moving to Texas. It's why you'd expect the energy infrastructure to be strong in Texas, but it's also why we have the largest concentration of any state in the country of chip manufacturing plants, either planned or already in operation, because we're a dynamic, pro-growth economy that values jobs up and down the line.
I agree with that.
But one of the consequences of not being a non-union state as we are, Cesar Chavez, when he unionized the farm workers, had a radical effect on mainly Hispanic population that brought them into politics, so that they became a participant in politics in California and have never really been a consequential element in Texas politics.
I'm not certain I agree with that.
Where has ever been the magnetic, charismatic, Hispanic, statewide politician in Texas?
There was a guy, but he got in trouble. His name was Henry Cisneros.
Yeah, but he never actually offered himself for statewide office.
I know, and there was a reason why, because he was having a girlfriend on the side and knew it would come out.
Oh, that would be so shocking these days.
Yeah. No, look, I'm not certain I agree with you that you cannot compare the Hispanic population, the Latino population of California to Tejanos. They're entirely different. For example, we inherited the Mexican middle class after the revolution of 1910 to 1913. So, we have, if you take a look at Tejanos versus Californians or Arizonans, for example, we have a much higher education level for our Hispanic population than either one of them. Because again, we've been around for a long time, and we also inherited the middle class from Mexico. So it's a different kind of a deal. And I'm not certain I judge this. Look, we had Alberto Gonzalez on the Supreme Court, blah, blah, blah. But I think the Hispanic population in Texas is more diverse than it is in California, and I think as a result is more diverse politically as well.
In writing this article about Austin and interviewing a lot of former Californians, I've wondered about where each of these states is going, and especially hearing the complaints of Californians about crime. Taxes is certainly a big part of it, but it's usually phrased that they're not getting the return on their investment. They're not tax refugees, but they clearly are. But needles in the front yard, being afraid to go out to dinner at night, just propagandizing in the public schools. These are the common threads of what I've heard from Californians, and it makes me, in a kind of reflected view, a little worried about the future of California. If people are voting with their feet in such large numbers, what's going to happen here?
Yeah, look, the last census is the first census since California joined the Union in 1850 in which it lost representation in Congress.
Yeah.
Think about that. First time. And, our country will be strong if we, it worries me that we are anchored on the east and west by two decaying states, New York and California. I'm glad all these smart people are coming to Texas. I'm glad they're moving their jobs, moving their headquarters, moving their manufacturing. But it's not healthy for the country to have the two great entry points, New York and San Francisco/LA, be places where people, I agree with you about taxes. It's not per se taxes. It is a question of governance. It's like, the belief that they're living in a failed state, that the government isn't living up to their expectations. And that's not healthy.
Well, it's not healthy that Texas, the Republicans in Texas pretend that climate change doesn't exist. Texas has said by 2030, here that you're going to have to not be able to sell cars that are based on fossil fuels. That's visionary. That's thinking about being a steward of the future. Texas is going to continue selling oil and gas, and I'm a consumer of it, but it's going to be the petro capital, and other places are going to find new economies and new ways to move the world forward in the 21st century. I don't find California broken. If your judgment is who's got the most people, that's a Texas chauvinistic remark, because that's like bigger is better. Bigger isn't always better. I don't need the big, I like mom and pop shops of San Francisco more than a big box store along the highway. So it's about having an aesthetic living. California's communities bring the environment into it, even here around the valley, into a way that's very special, and it's expensive, but it matters in the long run. And so I find that this is a state that should be hugely proud of what it's done, but its problem is going to be climate. And the fact is also that you have the federal government in Texas a lot with the national parks. Look how much land is forest, wilderness, protected lands in the state. Texas shuns the federal government. They snuck in a Big Bend or a big thicket, but by and large, they want to go it alone in a more states' rights conservative view. And California has an idea of greater inclusiveness. But where Karl's right, and is in my view, or where we have shared common ground, which we're looking for here, is I don't understand this policy of the way that the issues like homelessness are being treated anywhere. But Los Angeles has a deep problem. Sanctuary cities are a deep problem. And I agree on those things. But to suddenly, as you said earlier, Karl, say San Francisco, San Francisco is magnificent, world city. Have you not been in Marin, the Golden Gate Bridge, Oakland and Berkeley and Stanford in the Bay Area?
Let me tell you about the Golden Gate Bridge.
Now you don't like the Golden Gate Bridge.
I love it.
Because it's not the wobbly bridge.
I have some business
Texas.
associates who were out visiting Silicon Valley and visiting with some space launch people and so forth. They said, we got a couple hours before our plane. Let's go to the Golden Gate Bridge. Drive to the Golden Gate Bridge. This is like 4 weeks ago. Go drive to the Golden Gate Bridge, park in the National Park Service parking lot there, and come back to find their car completely vandalized and every piece of electronic equipment.
Oh, that happens everywhere.
Yeah, well, it hasn't happened to me in Austin recently. I don't know, but look, let me
because
you're the environmental historian, but Texas had something happen to it at its beginning that made it difficult, made it much different from California. California, the public lands were the public lands, and they were, because it was a territory, they were federal lands.
Right.
So it was easy for the federal government to say Yosemite is going to become a national monument or a national park because those were federal lands. When Texas joined the Union, we kept our public lands. And those public lands, the revenue therefrom was dedicated to the public universities, permanent university fund, and the public school fund. So when we found oil on those lands, they became an enormous source of wealth with huge endowments that benefit our universities and our public schools.
$67 billion.
Yeah, so we ended up being in a different place. I don't think the Californians said, oh, we want all of our land to be in the hands of the federal government, and we are enthusiastic about the creation of national parks. And Texas said, screw the national parks. It's just that they went different ways.
Let me.
Not true. Point Reyes, the most expensive real estate in perhaps the United States by Mill Valley, is 1962, became a national seashore because the people of the Bay Area wanted to protect green space and have a gorgeous area to save among the great redwood.
So all of them happened that way?
Not all of them, but Channel Islands off of here at Santa Barbara happened that way. They recently did.
Yosemite?
This is recently did Death Valley National Park. These are all recent manifestations.
Which was BLM land.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Well, it's federal land.
Lands up along the coast have been bought and preserved. You have roads like the road to Big Sur that's not been commercialized with Buc-ee signs everywhere because they wanted to keep it scenic.
I got it. But the point is, the vast majority of federal parkland and federal national monuments in the state of California were not created by public-private partnerships of Californians saying, we want this. They were created by the federal government with the power of the United States Congress. True or false?
Yes.
Okay,
true.
good. That's my point.
No, but it's the fair point, but I'm saying the environmental movement of the 60s and 70s that gave us Endangered Species Act, Clean Air and Water Acts, the EPA, everything the Republican Party is trying to gut today, impact statements, the birth of the environmental impact statement with NEPA And
The creation of the EPA.
But it came out of Nixon. It came out of California.
Yeah,
and
California.
It came out of California creating those environmental laws. This state led the nation on that, and it's still leading the nation.
Well, this is a really good point, because in the crux of our conversation is that Texas and California are going to change places in terms of their power vis-a-vis the United States. That Texas is going to become the leading state in the nation and is close to it. And so the expression, the country that we have in many respects is a reflection of all the energy and the imagination and the compassion that came out of California. What do you see when Texas assumes that role? Karl, I'll let you start.
I think Texas is going to have a different influence. It's going to be rocking and rolling economic growth, prosperity, low taxes, limited government, personal freedom. We're not going to be telling Texans, you got to drive an electric car by 2035 and you aren't going to be able to buy something that's fueled by hydrocarbons. We're not that kind of a people. And there'll be strengths and weaknesses of that, but there'll be a hell of a lot more strengths, which is why people are coming to Texas and leaving California.
Doug?
Well, I agree with that to the extent of, though, but the guys, honestly, people all over the globe see of California as paradise. And what you guys are saying is California is gone, its better days are over, because Texas is getting a population, because they're building unregulated spec cities so people can pour into. This state has meant to be a great nation or state, you have to be a steward of your land and your resources. And California's done a remarkable job at that, and Texas has not. Texas is about the quick dollar. And people in America, as we've gotten quicker for the dollar, that's where they want to go. And we're also looking at Texas of the weirdest laws in the country, of people carrying guns to class, guns everywhere, that's somehow cool, and nobody will stand up to against the gun lobby. So it's powerful, Texas. But I don't think,
God.
well, where would you think the best places to live in the world are? Name them to me. Australia, New Zealand, Sweden?
Texas.
But because of an unfettered capitalist philosophy.
Yeah, well, you want to see unfettered capitalism, go to Sweden.
Well,
So,
it's beautiful there.
But look, I know where you're coming from, but the idea that, for example, that they're unfettered, people who will not do anything against the unfettered gun lobby. How about our state?
Come on.
How about our state senior
Governor
senator?
Abbott is so.
Let me finish,
so
Doug.
corrupt.
Let me finish. How about our state senior senator who led a bipartisan effort in Congress not to pass one, but 2 gun control laws that are making? Take the first one. Have you paid attention to this? Mm-hmm. Our state senior senator John Cornyn, after the massacre of 22 people at a church in Central Texas, South Central Texas, got together with Murphy of Connecticut and passed a thing called the Fix Nix Bill, because they found out that the airmen pushed out of the military had done things in the military that meant that he should have been unable to purchase a weapon. And instead, he purchased a weapon and killed 22 people. And it turned out that the United States military, with the exception of the Marine Corps, was failing to make the required reports that would put in the Fix Nix system people who couldn't buy a gun. And in addition, both blue states and red states were refusing to provide that material, that same information, on a timely basis or in a complete way. Idaho said, we'll get around to it when we want to, and Washington State said, we don't give a shit if it's right or wrong. We're going to send it to you when we want to, and if it's incomplete, screw it. And you know what happened? These two guys got together, and they fixed that thing, and they said, you got 2 years to get it right, or there will be penalties on your state or penalties on your federal agency if you don't report this information that allows us, in doing a background check, to find out somebody isn't able to purchase a weapon. They did it. They made it happen. Within 2 years, the information was in there. Take a wild guess as to how many records this measure added to the list of people who cannot purchase weapons in the United States of America. 8 million. 8 million, because the government was not doing what it said. The pro-gun people like me say, enforce the laws that you got. And what we had was a system in which people who should not have been able to purchase a weapon, like that guy. Now, they did it again after Uvalde, because it turned out, you know the kid who killed all those other kids? He should not have been able to purchase a weapon. He had done bad things as a 16 or 17-year-old that were wiped from his record at the age of 18, so he went out and purchased an AR-15 and killed those kids.
Yeah.
And what they did is, again, a pro-Second Amendment conservative senator from Texas says, I'm going to push a measure that is going to say for the purchase of purchasing a weapon, if you did a bad thing as a teenager, it does not get expunged from your record for the purpose of a background check. Which is and you know what? He runs for re-election and wins 60-some-odd% of the vote. So
Well,
don't tell me that people are not willing to stand up and do the right thing when it comes to guns. They may not want to do what you want to do, which is get rid of the AR-15.
Right.
And one other thing, while we're on the subject.
Well,
we're not on the
it's not
subject.
filibuster.
I got one thing to say, one more thing to say.
We're not in Washington anymore.
You know, the people who care the most about the land in Texas are the people who own the land. We're a private property right state. You go to some rancher or farmer and say you're mistreating your land and you're a polluter. They'll kick your ass.
I agree with that.
Yeah, because we have a very strong property right state. We have ranches that have been in the hands of families like you have here in this state for hundreds of years, and they prize that land.
Okay.
You
were talking. I just want to say one rebuttal to the filibuster. He was mentioning a politician from Texas, Ted Cruz. When our city froze in Austin, went to Cancun with his bag. We have no electrical grid that works in the state because Texas won't share its electricity with other states. How is that a model for America? When all the other states are sharing their electrical grid, we don't in Texas. It's at any moment while we're talking here, the lights may be going off in Dallas and Austin.
Yeah.
And no, really, it's an abomination, the electric system, because it's like a mafia. It's a big electric power center.
Let me interject.
And I was short.
I haven't had a chance to talk for a moment. Are you going to pay him to talk?
No, I got $200 right here. I'm going to give it to Wright. Let's see if the electric grid fails in the next 2 days in Texas during the cold snap.
No.
Put your money where your Put your money where your mouth is.
Wait a
You
minute.
just said it, buddy. You just said it.
No, only an ass would pick a date for something. Well, that's silly.
Because it's supposed to be
silly.
It's supposed to be 65 degrees. Look, I'll give you this. The grid.
So you're
failed in the
saying
next
our grid
month.
is great in Texas. You're saying our electric grid's good.
We have the highest percentage of renewals in the country. Don't you like that? Highest percentage of renewable energy of any state in the country.
Yeah, we have.
And what is the purpose of opening up our grid to sell electricity to California?
Because it'd be the American thing to do, Carl.
No,
it's not a Texas thing.
Okay. No. Hold on to it, because I want you to hold on to it, because we're going to see if it goes down. You said it right here in front of this crowd. See if you'll back it up.
I've heard you do that Carney routine before with the money thing. It's like the third time I've seen you do it at a public thing. It's like evoking
bullshit.
William McKinley when he doesn't need to be evoked. It doesn't make sense.
So,
first time I did it, but it's nice to know you saw me do it before. Mind telling me where?
I have.
Where?
You do it everywhere. It's one of your parlor tricks.
So
Come on, let's switch over. Go ahead. Take over your panel.
I wanted to add. I had you invoked Ted Cruz. I had lunch with him a few years ago, and he asked to get together, which was very surprising to me and quite sporting. And I brought up, Ted, climate change, really? Come on. And he said, well, Larry, there have been satellites in space that haven't detected a change in the Earth's temperature in 70 years. And I said, well, there are thermometers on Earth, Ted. They do a pretty good job of that. But I do think that there are real problems in both of our states. And we're not doing a good job amending them. And I contend that unipolar politics is much the problem in both of our states, that a cross-fertilization of ideas and get away from the extremists that tend to dominate both parties in both states.
I have a slightly different view of that. There's a big difference between California and Texas. California organizes its legislature on a partisan basis, and we thankfully do not. This may surprise you Californians, because politics is a blood sport in Texas. Chairmen of the committees in the House and Senate are Democrats and Republicans. Chairman of the Transportation Committee, for example, is a Democrat. Chairman of the Public Education Committee, a black Democrat from Houston. I think this is one of the great things about our legislature, because by not, sure, we'll have partisan issues. Redistricting, count on it. Sanctuary cities went nuts. Abortion, nuts. But on a whole range of things that the ordinary government is concerned with, we try and put partisanship aside, meet 140 days every 2 years, go home for a year and a half and live under those laws. And I think that's frankly one of our strengths. When we had Lieutenant Governor, we had to cut our budget like you all did in California a decade ago. But we had to cut it not from future growth. We had to cut the absolute level of state spending by $10 billion. So we had a roughly $110 billion budget. We had to cut it by $10 billion from the last biennial spending. And it passed the House 147-3 because Republicans and Democrats got together and said, what can we do to try and get it done? And I think this has been particularly helpful on education, where we have the strong right wants full charters, but full vouchers, but we have a very robust charter program that is bipartisan in nature and has been widely supported, and it's having a real effect, particularly in our urban school districts.
You've said to me, and I think you said publicly before, that you've been concerned about the extremists in the Republican Party taking the abortion bill another step. It's hard to imagine there's another step, but the legislature is in session right now. Do you see any signs of that?
We'll see. We also have a very funny, as Larry knows, a very funny legislature in that committees don't get appointed, the committee members don't get appointed until February, and then they have to get all their work done by the end of May.
Yeah.
And my sense is the leaders, at least in the House and the governor's office, want to have a productive session that isn't balled up all in abortion. But I don't know how it's going to play out.
Yeah. Doug, in terms of homelessness, you touched on that. This is a problem that both of our states have. Yeah. And San Francisco is particularly afflicted, it seems, and has been struggling with this problem for decades now. And I think the current governor designed, when he was a city controller, or what's the office? Before that. Yeah, he was a supervisor when they began, trying to create permanent housing and stuff like that. It has not been a success. And, Austin is a larger town with half the homeless population that San Francisco has. And have you talked to Alan Graham? Do you know who that is?
I have not.
All right, well, I was writing about homelessness in Austin, and we had a long history of failure with homelessness as well. But there's one guy named Alan Graham who, in 1998, he was in a Catholic men's group, and he he was moved to found this Mobile Loaves and Fishes, taking food to the homeless. But he decided to start a housing project for chronic homelessness. That we have maybe 4,000 people who are experiencing homelessness in Austin, but about 3,000 are chronically homeless. That's the population. In order to get into this, you have to have been on the street for 10 years. And he persuaded some guys to buy some land. He built, at this point, 400 mini houses. They don't have restrooms, they don't have kitchen facilities, but those are they're communal. So 400. At the end of this year, he's adding another 1,400 units. And some of them are mini houses, those little micro houses, and some are RVs and so on. But he has one individual, moved by Christian charity, has addressed half of Austin's homeless problem. And it's stunning to me that can be done. I think in the sense of being a Texan approach, he describes himself as a serial entrepreneur, and they have an entrepreneurial center on the Community First Village. But I'm wondering about the good-hearted efforts that are done in California, for instance, with homelessness, that turn out to be very expensive and not very fruitful. That is, I think, one of the charges that the immigrants throw at.
Yeah. Look, the homelessness situation in America is ghastly. And God forbid we have an economic recession and what it's going to be. San Francisco's policies have failed. There are many reasons: the climate, the amount of people that wanted to come to California, the drug culture, the allowing of congregation of people without finding proper medical check-ins. So I don't want to belabor that. I'm looking for answers. Like you just picked a good one.
Graham's got good answers
Graham's got a good one.
Because he also makes certain that there are a large percentage of these are veterans.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
he makes certain that there are.
And Houston
the
does
VA
that
assistant,
too.
And San Antonio does it you don't have to be on the street for 10 years to get into their program. The other thing is that he
Carl,
insists on values.
It was questioned to me. I was trying to say that I recently went to Savannah and looked at a city the size of Savannah, Georgia, is taking on homelessness in a very real and interesting way, because you can identify who's coming in and who's coming out. There are people that are, and it is 1,000 points of light, like Brett Steve was saying earlier, of different groups around the country doing it. But the government of California is failing on the homeless issue. There's no question about it. I'm not trying to rub it in their face. It was a path filled with good intentions. But I think larger, the answer is not what Karl said, is I think Houston's doing a good job with homeless veterans. And I think there are pockets around the country, but it still seems that we're not making the progress anywhere that we need to do. And certainly faith-based organizations everywhere are going to play a big role in that.
Another thing that really moved me by encountering this, for one thing, they pay rent. And it turns out a lot of these people who have been experiencing homeless have sources of income, Medicaid and, veterans, and but they don't have access to it.
Yeah.
But the other thing, one of the great attractions of this is they have a cemetery. And there's the great fear of people on the street is they're going to die on the street. And last year there were 220 people who died on the streets in Austin. Here they have, a memorial column and and so they create a kind of allegiance to the place. So those kinds of solutions, I think, that's something that happened in Texas. I think California could find a way to do that kind of thing. We could try to experience, if we could get some of for instance, the oil field regulation, the methane gas is coming out of our fracking wells. We have to acknowledge that natural gas has made a profound difference in cleaning the air, but the methane that needlessly leaks out of these oil rigs is really damaging. If we had the kind of regulatory power that California has, then we could make a profound difference in saving our planet. Listen, we have expired our time, so thank you for listening to our wrangling over here.
Thank you.
Thank you.